I bet.
Yeah. Left all the devices at home.
Oh, great.
Only thing we brought was the cell phone. And just tons of ocean time. And it's been I've been working really crazy for the city this summer. Vacation from the vacation. I've been doing meetings, budget meetings, visits. It's just been nonstop. And I told Jeff I was hoping that I would get to the bottom of quite a number of things for public safety before I go back to school, because I don't have this kind of availability, once we get back to school. So we're going to have a meeting on Monday, Dean, the mayor, Peter, and myself, to talk about some policy things. I want to see happen. Yeah, also another story for another day.
Yeah, we can have one of our phone combos. I'll be in North Carolina next week.
Oh, good for you.
My daughter.
I'm not going to be here next week. I'm doing one last little getaway, just me and Wyatt. We'll do our museum tour of Saratoga. We do the military museum, the art museum down there. I'm going to have dinner with my sister and my niece.
Eat at Hattie's.
Just
Have you ever been at Hattie's?
I don't think so.
Well, let me try to give you a link, because it's just great.
Oh, okay. So that's, sorry, the world will have to turn without me next week.
You're a sugar. I never would have expected that.
Like I said, I have worked really, really hard this summer, and I need some
You
time.
know that I am just playing with you, right?
Yeah, oh, I know.
But you do feel guilty, I know. One does. Feel like,
Yes, we're chatting.
All right, I just didn't know if you know, I hadn't started it off for a while, so.
Oh no, that's fine.
okay,
Who's running this?
so we live stream? Is Mike gonna Skype?
Oh, here we go.
Is Mike Skyping into it?
No one told me.
Okay.
Look at this sonar image going. That's not anything.
That's exactly what I said.
Maybe.
That's my feeling.
Did we get no finance report this week?
I didn't, yes.
Because we can't sign off bills without.
Right, well, we need the stack anyway, so. Hi.
If everybody's ready, we're here today to conduct a public hearing. City of Plattsburgh is holding a public scoping session on draft scoping document for the City of Plattsburgh Downtown Revitalization Project's generic environmental impact statement. We're going to begin with a couple of comments from our experts who are going to help guide through this process. And if you intend and wish to speak at this public hearing, we ask you to please sign up accordingly. So let's begin. I think that some of you were able to attend the open house yesterday that was designed to show the public the full gamut of the efforts we've been making on the downtown for the last number of years, including the Saranac River Trail, some of the work we're doing at the harbor side, the wastewater treatment plant, and other stuff. But obviously one big component of it are the various projects that we're going to consider today as a subset of our various downtown initiatives. So how about if we start off by hearing a little bit about what a scoping session is, and then a little bit about what we anticipate including in this discussion, then we'll open up the hearing. Please.
Me? What do you want?
And just maybe say we're one of the councilors.
Is anyone councilor?
Sure.
Well, Councilor Kelly will not be here. He could sit here if you want. Councilor Kelly will not be here. So I'll move my bag And
And is hopefully an exceptionally responsible council person.
Hello.
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Mark Shackner. I'm an attorney with a law firm in Glens Falls called Miller, Mannix, Shackner, and Hafner. My partner, Jackie White, is with me as well. And we are special counsel to the city. I guess you'd call us special environmental counsel to the city for the purposes of helping guide the city through a process, which the process that I'm about to describe very, very briefly is the purpose of the meeting here late this afternoon. The process is called the SEQRA review process. SEQRA is an acronym, S-E-Q-R-A. It stands for State Environmental Quality Review Act. And what the City Council has decided to do is to conduct environmental impact review of a series of downtown development and redevelopment projects, and to do it together in a document called a generic environmental impact statement. An environmental impact statement is a creature of this state statute, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, which in a thumbnail sketch or in a nutshell requires decision makers, governmental decision makers in the state of New York, to take potential environmental impacts of their decisions into account when making their decisions. This statute, S-E-Q-R-A, that goes by the acronym SEQRA, does not require environmental impact statements for all governmental decisions. It requires environmental impact statements for very large, important governmental decisions if they meet in certain criteria. Here, the City Council has done what we believe is something that's extraordinarily responsible by deciding not only to cause the preparation of an environmental impact statement for one or two of the proposed downtown development and redevelopment projects, but actually look at them in the aggregate in this thing called a generic environmental impact statement, which sort of, as its name tends to indicate, looks at things together more holistically than on a project-specific, site-specific, separate review basis. It lumps them together and looks at potential environmental impacts all together. It's not something that's pursued often. The "it" I'm referring to is the generic environmental impact statement approach. It's not pursued often, but it's considered a very, very responsible way to pursue environmental impact review because it avoids what's called segmentation or separately reviewing projects that are occurring in the same basic geographical area and that could have synergistic impacts on or with each other. So the way this works is the city's going to require and cause the preparation of this thing called a generic environmental impact statement. The regulations that govern this process say that there should be opportunities for public participation along the way. There are several such opportunities. Tonight is essentially the first such opportunity. What we're here for specifically now is the city has caused the preparation of what's called a scoping document. A scoping document is essentially a glorified table of contents for an environmental impact statement. And we have a draft scoping document. It's been prepared by our consultant, the Chazen Companies. Their representative, Chris Round, is here. He'll probably be the next person to address the audience. I assume it's available, I don't know where, somewhere in the room it was available. I saw that it was available. And in order to facilitate and maximize the opportunities for public participation in this process, the city has decided to conduct this scoping session, that's what this gathering is called, a scoping session, and also allow written comments to be submitted until next Monday, August 26th. So our purpose here today is we're conducting what's called a scoping session, which is kind of a SEQRA lingo label for a meeting at which anybody who wants has an opportunity to make comments on the draft scoping document. So another way of putting that is, this is your opportunity to tell us if there are things that you think should be considered in the scope of this draft generic environmental impact statement that are not included in our draft scoping document. This is your opportunity to tell us that. If there are things that we've included in our draft scoping document that you think should not be included in our draft scoping document, this is also your opportunity to tell us that. What this is not, it's sort of more important to make sure everybody understands what the purpose of this meeting is not. This is not a meeting to get up and say, whether you think these are wonderful projects for downtown Plattsburgh or horrible projects for downtown Plattsburgh. You may have opinions along either of those lines or anything in between. You are absolutely entitled to those opinions, but this is not the opportunity to express those opinions. The purpose of this meeting is to give us input on the draft scoping document, which is, as I said earlier, the glorified table of contents for this document that will be prepared over the next several months called the Generic Environmental Impact Statement. That's why we're here today. Any questions or comments about any of that?
It's terrific. Thank you.
Should we
Really
turn to
good
Chris?
introduction.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Just speak up here. As Mark indicated, Chris Round from the Chasing Companies. We're a planning firm, and we've helped the city draft this scoping document. And as Mark said, the scoping document is a table of contents. And if you have a copy in front of you, it describes the project that is being undertaken, and it's actually a series of projects. The Durkee Street mixed-use development, Saranac River Walk, reconfiguration of Durkee Street, the addition of parking and streetscape improvements, Bridge Street parking improvements, activities at the Glens Falls National Bank site for enhancement of parking, and the West Hill Common improvements, as well as the addition and reconfiguration of parking at Broad Street parking lot, and the potential relocation of the farmers market to the Harborside area or some other area. And in our table of contents, we examine, and the GIS will examine what impacts might these projects have on land use, zoning, and public policy. What impacts might they have on the visual environment, community character, as well as aquatic and natural resources. Are there adequate utilities to serve these facilities? I think of particular interest to the public are the impacts on traffic, pedestrians, transit, and parking itself. I think that's at the core of this analysis. Fiscal and economic considerations. How might the project or projects impact tax revenues to the city, as an example. As well as we examine historic and cultural resources, and there's other elements in it that are required under seeker that we examine, and those are alternatives, impacts that cannot be avoided, cumulative impacts, and I think that's one of the reasons we're here, is we're looking at all these things as in total, as a group of activities. And the scoping document outlines in a rather concise way what will the analysis actually provide, and so if you have this in front of you, or if you have the opportunity to review it between now and Monday, and the analysis is not exhaustive enough or is too brief, you're able to provide us feedback on what should the analysis include. And so that's my real brief introduction to the scoping document includes.
Thank you.
And Mark, I know I apologize if you did not mention it. So comments will be received through the end of the business day Monday, and then we will prepare a response or responsiveness document, evaluating those comments, and look to provide that document to council, and potentially revisions to the scope and document that would then be presented to council for review and adoption.
Thank you.
Did you say we had some sense of how many people wanted to make comments on the scoping document?
Would anybody like to sign up? Nobody has signed up so far.
So as of right now, no people want to make comments on the scoping document because this is the best scoping document that's ever been created.
Well, that's
No,
reassuring.
you just have to sign in, Sylvia, and then you can come up.
I don't have questions about the document, but I have questions about the process, maybe.
Okay.
Nothing scary.
Thank you.
So please
Would
come
you
forward.
mind coming to the mic, Sylvia?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
So just so that I can understand the process, that today's meeting is about whether or not the table of contents is complete? Or,
That's a good short version of it. Yeah, it's whether it's to take comments. This is, by the way, I think I mentioned this, but if I didn't, this is not a required step in the process, but the city council felt that it wanted to maximize opportunities for public participation and public input. So we could have done this with having only a time in which written comments could be submitted, but we thought it would be nice to have a public scoping session so that if people were more comfortable showing up live and making comments verbally about the scope of the document, they could do so. But your short summary is not inaccurate. Essentially, we have this draft scoping document, or this scoping document, which would be the glorified table of contents, and this is an opportunity for anybody who wants to comment on that scope.
And so if we were to submit anything written, it would be written request to add to the table of contents,
Any omissions, additions, those kinds of things.
subtractions.
Flesh something out in more detail than it seems to be fleshed out in the table of contents, something like that.
So it's not, the idea is not for members of the public to respond to the DRI.
You're right. We tried to emphasize that we're not at that point in the process. The state law that I made reference to earlier requires this environmental impact review process to take place before the Common Council takes any legislative action relating to these projects. There will be opportunities, there will be a public hearing. This is not technically a public hearing.
Right.
There's actually going to be a public hearing on the resulting document, or the document that results from the scoping process, which is called the Draft Generic Environmental Impact Statement. There'll be a public hearing on that. That would be one of probably several opportunities for the public to get up and do what I said earlier is not the purpose of today, which is get up and say, well, these are wonderful projects or these are horrible projects. But that's not the purpose of today.
So based on the scoping document, the city will conduct the GEIS and produce a report?
Correct.
And once the report is produced, they will have opportunity to comment on it?
That is correct. There'll be a public comment period and a public hearing.
I was just wondering if there's a possibility, and this might not be directly involved, but if there would be a possibility to have public comments be posted online at any point in this process? Because I know just for example, that like London, England, when they have controversial new monuments or new parks or revisions of landscape, they resort to a kind of extensive public consultation where they invite members of the public, including anyone in the world, to post something on to submit comments, and those comments then become publicly viewable.
You're looking at the wrong person to ask as to whether they'll be online. The public comment period, anybody in the world who wants to submit written comments during the public comment period can do so. Anybody in the world who wants to show up in greater downtown Plattsburgh at the public hearing is more than welcome to do so. The online part, I haven't the faintest idea.
If I might, Mike, just to build on that, so when the draft EIS is produced, and Mark mentioned there's a public hearing, there's a comment period, all those comments are captured, are the public record, they're included, and they're responded to in the final generic environmental impact statement. So that, the record is built in that fashion, and you will see all the comments if you're looking, and we're required to post the documents on the web as well. So that helps.
That answers my question
Terrific.
in a very favorable way. So that's all I had to ask. Thank you
you.
very much.
Any other individuals like to sign up? And please, if you'd like to sign up, please come up and sign up now.
And how will they be able to, get their comments to you? How is that gonna be gathered?
The written comments.
Either
No, but how do they get to you?
here at City Hall, you mean?
Yeah, so,
Well, the comments are gonna come here presumably, and
and then they'll be
you
forwarded
mail
to
them,
you.
or-
Okay, that's what I
Doesn't
wanted.
matter.
So is it via email, a link online? That's the question.
Yeah, I just wondered how the information was going to get to each of them.
Maybe that's a question for Matt. I
Are
don't
we
know.
talking about how the public can submit written comments on the
Yes.
draft?
Right, right.
They should be submitted in writing directly to the common council, care of Beth Harlan, 41 City Hall
Oh, so
Place.
written out
Written
comments.
Written
Okay.
comment, that's what, good to know.
Please.
And that was in the notice that we posted last week.
Okay, okay.
My name's Kurt Gervich. I live at 185 Cornelia, and I'm a member of the City Planning Board, as well as an environmental planner. And the meat of a seeker analysis is in both the analysis of environmental impacts, but the comparison of different alternatives. And there are two alternatives listed in the table of contents that will receive attention. One is a no action alternative,
Could you cite the page, please?
20. One is a no action alternative, right? Everything stays the same. What's the impact of that compared to the impact of the preferred action? And the second is a multi-story parking garage
Yeah.
featuring 250 spaces. And it just seems to me at the stage that we're at that often seeker analysis have more than two alternatives, and that the no action alternative is totally appropriate. The multi-story parking garage as an alternative may be appropriate, that's fine, but I'd like to see more alternatives, and alternatives that are in line with some of the other proposals that have been put forth to the downtown space, especially the Durkee Street space. So people have talked about parks and amphitheaters and lots of different things. But those aren't appearing as alternatives here, and so it seems that the city isn't hearing that those are ideas that members of the community would like to see incorporated into the space, and that the comparison of environmental impact should occur between both the preferred analysis, the preferred action that's being put forward, as well as some more kind of realistic actions for that space besides a 250 space parking garage. Basically, more alternatives is the meat of my statement.
So you're saying that the alternatives listed should reflect what's surfaced in public comment along the way?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
should surface what's been put forth in public comment, and there's really only one alternative here, right? The no action alternative is required as something that always is included in a seeker analysis. But the multi-story parking garage featuring 250 spaces, I think, is a relatively unrealistic alternative that I haven't heard discussed.
Though it's been cited.
Yeah, okay, maybe, and I haven't been a part of those conversations or read them, so that's fine. But it seems like there's really only one alternative that's being
Yeah.
put forth, and it seems like there should be more alternatives put forth in the analysis.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Kurt.
We have one other speaker. Going down. Please.
I'm just surprised that with everything that we have to look over, you want written comments exclusively to Beth by Monday. And I just feel that this process is exceedingly rushed and not allowing enough time for all of us, and perhaps even all of you, to consider everything that's been put out there. And I just am uncomfortable with the fact that it appears that this process is being, as I have mentioned before, railroaded through. And I suppose I would like to chide whoever set the deadlines for not giving enough time for people to look things over and to be able to get their thoughts together and to give you ideas on paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other people like to sign up? Seeing none, let's close the hearing then, and thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you.
When is it appearing? Hello, Patrick McFarland.
Why, hello,
That is
Michelle.
quite a beautiful suit you have on. I love it.
Thank you.
Makes you look cool, calm, and collected.
Yes, that's what I'm going for.
Did you have a chance to look at any of the articles I sent regarding the
I
public?
read all of them. I looked at them, and like Michelle sent 3 articles. None of them are going to change my mind, but then I read all of them.
No, they were all raising questions.
I thought the
about-
first one was the best one.
Well, it was the most concise.
That second one, you know what, I've never seen the Latinx thing. I guess that means for Latina and
Latinx,
Latinos.
Latinx.
Yeah.
But the other, but the
What was
last
something
one,
about Latinx?
the last one is a pretty good study and pulls together recommendations
I'll admit,
from.
the last one I kind of skimmed. Like,
Yeah,
because
it
I
was
had clients come
quite a
in.
bit lengthier.
But it was pretty interesting.
The NPR article is great.
Well, I mean, and the bulk of what I said was, we initiated this new program last year. Where's the data to support the
Well,
efficacy
did you
of
see
what
my
they've done?
response?
No, I didn't.
I read her response.
Okay, so I have read the documents, and the documents require, the contracts require reports.
They all do,
Feedback.
we never get reports.
Well, that's gonna have to change, and I'm bringing that up tonight, so.
That's right.
I am.
Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And which
Why don't we
is,
just vote it down?
Well, I plan to.
Mike's not gonna be here, by the way.
Yeah.
no, we don't. Peter will be here, but he's gonna be late.
We could table it and ask for a report.
What's the report
Don't
gonna
look at
say?
me with those weary eyes.
I'm just listening, just listening.
I hate tabling things. We can vote it down and say you can bring it back when you come.
Yeah, okay.
Hello, Chief. I'm doing well. How are you? Hello, Chief Ritter. How are you?
No, I didn't get your email.
Oh, God, I hope I hit send.
Well, he said that he did, though.
Oh, you got my response. All right. Then I did hit
I
send.
got it.
Maybe this is just not refreshed.
Let me ask you a question about this, scoping document. And as it pertains to, Peter Gervich's, comment. So more alternatives would really, you know, as Rochelle pointed out, because of the more alternatives in terms of what has already been discussed as part of the deal. But isn't the purpose of this document to deal with parking? Am I wrong? So, no?
It's gonna deal with
Purpose
the
of this
parking.
document is to deal with, I mean, parking is brought into with reviewing the entire DRI impact. Actually, it's wider than I thought. I didn't know it was going into land, or like aesthetics and impact.
I was just
I
wondering.
gotta start wearing my hearing aids.
I was just
It's
wondering.
ridiculous.
But the alternatives, I don't know what the alternatives are. Does that mean like,
Well-
because people complain online, but no one really comes
With a
gives
solution,
us
with an alternative.
alternative.
What
No,
reaches
the only
out?
alternative I've seen is the one that references that initial report from the committee, the strategic plan that included like 645 unit mixed use building and the parking garage.
That wasn't actually a proposal. There's been no actual proposals. We only
Well,
got one. Like,
it was
so
an
the
initial
alternatives
plan that was
would be-
referenced and has been referenced, so I think that's why it appeared.
I would think the other alternatives would be anyone else that responded to the RFP and then get them.
That's true.
But there seems to be this big disconnect that people think we're doing anything. They complain and post on Facebook. No one's ever come talk to me about it.
Yeah, and I said
I've
that.
had two.
I said that last night with a woman who came to the open house, and she said, "Hi, how are you? We don't have any financials to be able to know if this is accurate." So, so one of the women I spoke to last night, she said, "So you're telling me that nobody is reaching out to you? None of your constituents are reaching out to you?" And I said,
Ask and
"No,
you shall receive."
not to
I'm not
any
asking
of
for
us
anything,
on
but-
the council. We're not receiving anything." Right.
We've heard no alternative, but really.
No, I was just saying that last night at the open house, I spoke to a woman who was completely blown away about the fact that nobody is reaching out to us individually as councilors to complain about the project or bring concerns to us.
I've heard like one or two.
I've heard none. Nobody in my ward is contacting me.
The most popular one that I've heard is from the likes of, like Danielle Hurst,
I feel like don't do
who
that.
believes that the money should have been reinvested into existing downtown improvements. Improvements to existing downtown stuff.
Payroll.
Doing the big
Sure.
hardest one first, get it out of the
I
way.
finally emailed David Spoladaro
Okay.
to tell him no dice. So. Well, he didn't respond, which is interesting.
Yeah, I do the MLB ones. Yeah. He gets all the
Looking.
public works ones.
See it?
That's Mike. Brown. That's also Jeff Moylan.
That is me. Do. And anything for code enforcement, if there is any. That is Counselor Moore. Can't find the numbers. Hey, there it
I haven't
is.
had a chance to watch the task force meeting yet, but I did hear from Sarah, my intern, towards the audience, and she couldn't tell who was talking.
Oh,
So I don't know if there's any minutes or something.
I am providing minutes. Here's my handwritten copy, and I will provide a
Thank you.
summary forthcoming.
Okay. Do you know what could you email them to me when I
Sure can. That will prompt me to do them sooner rather than later.
It's always easier too because it's fresher.
The essence is that from that action checklist, I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at it, very extensive. The mayor from the very
Do you
beginning
ever sign any of these?
thought
Me, I signed as little as possible.
I just keep pouring over the numbers. I'm like, where is it?
We're to the January 5th deadline to get our certification, which is 120 points. So he
What's that?
distilled a list of 30 projects that he feels like we've already begun, and we have a really good chance of earning the points to do that.
And so,
Councilor Moore.
yesterday,
Yeah, we actually went through
Need a
that
third
list, and I can
Both Neil
email
Patrick's
you
on
the
there.
list that we were working from. It's kind of a difficult to read chart because some of the cells got compressed as a lot of text got crammed in here. But my purpose is to, what my task will be to take those
Councilor Moore.
30,
One more
kind
time.
of make a
big one.
annotated list
Everybody
with
gets
the comments from the task force, and then set some priorities for them to approve.
Oh,
At our next
that
meeting.
would just ruin someone's night.
September 18th at 4 p.m.
I used to
and
tell my
that's another
students,
Wednesday.
that's how I graded papers. I'd take my papers and throw them down the stairs.
It
And
looks
the ones
like
that were the
it.
heaviest
Looks
got the
like
best
that's
grades,
a
because
trend.
clearly you wrote the most. Did they believe?
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. You want to pass that down the other way?
Another one?
No, it's the one you signed.
Oh, I just signed it. There you go, Councilor Moore.
It's nice having James Welch on the task force.
Good. Yeah, I thought he'd be good for that.
Yeah, he seems interested. Yeah.
That's for you.
For me? What am I doing now?
You sign it.
Oh, it's 4:30.
Read it over, make sure there's no graft and
4:30.
corruption.
Is it 4:30?
Yeah, it was cool. The vision. It was.
There it is, okay.
When did you get back? Officer return. Oh, okay.
4:30? I'm the only person on the committee here. Peter's going to be late. Otherwise, I'm a solo act up here.
I'll back you up.
Which I'm totally okay with. I don't think I can make unilateral decisions
Yeah, you can.
yet.
Seize power. Because the mayor's not here.
Mayor's not here?
Mike's interim or mayor pro tem,
That's
and you're the clerk, which means
That's it. Wait
you're
a
in the
minute.
line of succession.
Wait a minute.
You're now
Hey
mayor.
there, how are you?
Congratulations.
No.
I think so.
No.
No, I just didn't want,
Oh, okay. Blast.
you know, yeah, exactly. I'm glad to see the Energy Planning Committee up and running. So Colin had asked me if I would be on that back in
So Sylvie-
May. And then I left, I was teaching in
Councilor
China for
McFarland
8
did point
weeks
out
and
to me
didn't
that
have
our
a
mayor pro
chance
tem
to
is
email
not here, and I am
back. So
clerk of the
if you're
common
still
council,
looking for
puts
people,
me as
maybe-
the
Task force been
number 3 to
selected,
the
but
job.
Okay.
gosh, you know,
That
there's,
makes you
I
dictator
got
of
an
Plattsburgh.
Yes.
about the students' right. Well,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
this, see, the way Colin and I negotiated the settlement.
Well, I mean, we're not
Yeah.
making any
It
decisions.
requires some concessions on my part, but it's city-centric.
Yeah.
It's
Unless someone wants to fetch him.
Yeah.
And then there is
Scott?
an auxiliary organization,
Yeah.
loosely speaking, is now called Climate Action
Yeah.
Coalition.
Yeah.
And it's my goal to
It's
try to
4:35.
ask this group
I don't like doing like another.
to figure out
Yeah, that's the
actions
most
from
important
that
one. You have to
climate
read
smart
every page.
Yeah.
Okay.
checklist
Okay.
to move on.
To move on.
To help, let's say,
Okay.
you know, get SUNY hospital, school districts, industry to do greenhouse gas
Yeah.
inventories.
Could you pass these down to
And
the?
climate action
Okay.
plans.
Okay. So I had, a couple of years ago, distributed a survey through PMLD to all 8,000 households, and then I wrote an analysis of that with the policy proposal for the mayor
Okay,
in, it was probably last fall.
okay.
So,
We have to dig that up, we could probably use that.
well, yeah.
Did it tie in with an app you did?
The policy piece was, related ideas, but different.
Okay.
And
So the gist of it is policies that
side.
can help reduce energy consumption in the city.
policies can help reduce energy consumption and make better use of their preferred power,
Okay,
which is being kind
well,
of wasted.
you know, I'd say,
Sylvie, we have everything, done.
we've gotta meet with you, just to explore that.
Whole bunch of stuff
Do you
here.
have any inclination
More here.
at all?
So,
Yeah, well,
Because
so
I'm
that's what I was gonna
sure-
say, is he had asked me to be on this task
Yeah.
force.
But
And
guess he
then-
lost track of that.
Well, it was mid-May, and, I sent him an email back that said, I'd love to do it. And then I left town for 8 weeks. And
Right.
we all got running.
Well, and
So I'm happy to.
then there was a particular composition of the group that Dean worked on, and so
Yeah.
it was like it went through so many
Yeah.
steps and figure out what the right balance of people was. And Warren is actually from this coalition of
Right.
representatives.
Okay.
Right. So maybe, we could take a look at what you did
Yeah.
and see the places where it kind of interfaces with
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
climate
that's-
action
Yeah.
program.
Yeah. That's fine. Happy to come and
That would be
give a
great.
presentation or talk about
Yeah,
their
yeah.
results.
All right, let me digest that and great resource, why not take advantage of it, right? Thank you so
Cool.
much.
Yeah.
okay, I sent Scott, and now he's gone. Is there a black hole? Is there a black hole there we don't know about? What's going on?
I don't think you can start. You don't even have a plurality or or quorum. Is that what we call it? Quorum. Yeah.
Do we have a quorum?
We have 4.
She's the only one on her committee.
Oh, on our committee, I'm sorry. Yeah. That's
We could start the council.
an
meeting
enigma
early.
wrapped in a conundrum, or vice versa.
How about, I really would like the mayor
Why
to
don't
be
you
here.
just invite the
Yeah,
living
why don't we
community?
just do that? Okay, I'm gonna call to order, the public safety meeting for, August 22nd. Roll call. I'm here. All right. Counselor Ensel, not here, and Mayor Reed is here but not here. Okay. Are you going to take attendance for all others present?
Councilor Armstrong?
Here.
Councilor McFarland?
Here.
Councilor Moore?
Here.
Okay, so item number 1, reports from department representatives and discussion from counselors. We have, number 1, report from the Parking Violations Bureau for July 2019. And number 2, presentation from the Livable Community Advisory Committee. So I think we'll go ahead with that until the mayor returns. So if those representatives are here, I'll ask them to come forward.
Anyone from the Livable Community Advisory Committee is welcome to approach the podium.
Yes.
Mayor Reed, members of the council, department heads. My name is Art DeGrandpre. I've lived with my wife Peggy for the last 50 years in the heart of the center city on Pleasant Street. I was selected to be on the Livable Community Committee and assigned to codes enforcement. Other subcommittee members include Francis Wright, Councilor Enzel, and Councilor Jeff Moore. Our subcommittee was charged with the task of examining current city codes in order to determine which ones are effective in being enforced, to seek modification of those that don't meet the needs of the residents of Plattsburgh, and to propose new codes that would make Plattsburgh residents enjoy a better standard of living. Code enforcement is principally for all departments, but we targeted 2: the Office of Building Inspection and the Police Department. The building inspector and the chief of police were invited to a full department meeting. Questions and concerns were drafted and given to both gentlemen. Mr. McMahon graciously addressed our committee, explaining how his department functions and the number of personnel he has to carry out their duties. He explained that his department takes action when a complaint is made, and we ask that his department become more proactive. We would like to see the men he sends around to get out of their vehicles and to look up driveways and around corners. Our committee never met with the chief of police. I don't know why. I really don't know why. About this time a year ago, I took an afternoon stroll and walked by my dad's, Dr. DeGrandpre's office on the corner of Oak and Court Street. I was astonished to see the condition that it was in. And as I continued up Court Street, crossing North Catherine, and then on up to William, it dawned on me that most of the properties there are rental properties, and the buildings are in very, very poor condition. I then went to the City of Plattsburgh Real Property website. I discovered that about 62 to 64% of these properties are in the City of Plattsburgh are rentals. But there are much more, many, many more in the center city, principally because of the college students living there. I discovered that many of the landlords and owners of these buildings don't live in Plattsburgh, and some live in different states. I also learned that these magnificent homes at one time are now classified as inn lodges. Inn/lodges. I have to say, are you kidding? Back in 1983, a group of us from the center city met with the planning board. And at that time, they referred to these buildings as people warehouses. Not very complimentary. These landlords have no interest or concern for the residents of Plattsburgh, and the conditions of their properties reflect that. Keep in mind, renting to college students is a very profitable business. Michael Stetz, a student who graduated from SUNY last May, was a member of the college city relation subcommittee. He volunteered the information that he lived in a house on Brinkerhoff Street with 15 other young men, and that the owner generated an income for 10 months of $85,000. These are the words of Michael Stetz. It wouldn't take long to pay off that mortgage. With that kind of money, I would think the landlord can make his place look presentable. As last September approached, I started making photographs that I was eventually able to convert into a movie. I gave a couple of copies to Councilor Moore to share with all of you that are in this room, and I assume you've seen that movie.
I'll see it.
Later on, I printed around 25 glossy photographs. Elizabeth has those now.
Yep, and I shared them with everybody.
Wonderful.
And returned them back.
Wonderful. It is very clear that the center city is in a downward spiral. At times, it looks like a ghetto. Those of us who own private homes see the homes depreciate in value. If the center city is truly become a gateway to a vibrant downtown Plattsburgh, our code enforcement committee would ask the council to consider adopting a code that would require all rental properties in the city to be registered. If the building inspector doesn't know where a rental property is, obviously, he can't inspect it. That's just common sense. So the building inspector's office and the MLD should have this information. On a second and very pressing issue, the college students are back and start classes on Monday. To be frank, their return conjures up memories of past years. Large, unsupervised parties, unacceptable noise, and always the threat of vandalism looms on the horizon. We need the proactive assistance of the police department. We are asking for a police presence in the center city. Specifically, we need foot patrols. A foot patrol would have prevented the atrocity that occurred last December 18th when the owners of the Court Street Bed and Breakfast, along with their guests, were terrorized by the adjacent college fraternity. I have a little thing to show. This was a story that Cardinal Points did about the bed and breakfast. Today, when I looked at social media, I discovered that the bed and breakfast is closed permanently. The college fraternity has driven them out of business. This is wrong. It's 100% wrong. My wife went over and talked to the owner, Jason Sachs. He said that he has not been welcome in the city of Plattsburgh, and that really is a black eye. The city of Plattsburgh does a great job with the city's rampant drug problem. But remember, drugs are also on the streets, and a foot patrol would intercept some of these terrible situations. We ask for consistency on an officer answering a complaint for noise or for underage drinking. For one officer to give a ticket and another to give a warning, that's not fair. When you take some of the green out of the student's pocket, out of his wallet, out of the pocketbook, that kind of hurts. Our subcommittee is asking that when code violations involving vehicles blocking the sidewalk or sitting on lawns, that there'll be, when the police are called, the police will report quickly and will hand out a ticket to the vehicle in violation. On a very positive note, we have been assured from receiving help from SUNY Chief of Police Patrick Rasco, but he and his staff have constraints on just how much they can do away from campus. In summation, our Code Enforcement Committee implores the council to consider two requests. Number one, have all rental properties registered with the city and provide the building inspector with the manpower he needs to do the inspections when tenants change. With sufficient staff, he would be able to put the owner on notice to keep that property in good appearance and maintenance. And secondly, a strong police presence in the center city featuring foot patrols. You've seen the video, you've seen the photographs. However, you can see so much more if you would walk the areas that Councilor Jeff Moore and I do daily. It would be my pleasure to lead you, everybody in this room, on a 25 to 30-minute tour, perhaps early in September. I would talk with Councilor Moore about that. Finally, this document here, I had to have help carry it in, was put together in the year 2007. It has 150 pages in it. There's everything in here that would make Plattsburgh a better place to live. Nothing was ever enacted. Folks,
That's done, city and SUNY work together to produce
that's
that.
absolutely correct.
Right.
I thank you for your patience. I thank you for your time.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Mayor.
Art.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Art, can I ask you one question? You
Absolutely.
said that you'd like the building inspector's office to inspect every rental when tenants change. So does that mean when they register, they have to, as part of the registration, tell the building inspector's office when lease terms are up?
I'm thinking more of when school starts in September, make sure those buildings are in good order. You know, I'm out there every day and I can see the landlord's designees, the carpenters and the plumbers working. The stuff they tear out of these buildings, they get completely trashed. And the owners keep the security deposits to cosmetically put them back together. And that's exactly what happens. When my wife went over to see Jason Sachs today, the owner of the bed and breakfast, right next door at the frat house, they were putting that back together for the next group of hooligans to come in, sadly to say. But there's so many of these buildings that are in such poor shape. You know, 50 years ago, Plattsburgh was just a gorgeous place with the elm trees, nice lawns, big families, of course, then. And I would never blame this council, this mayor, for how things exist today. You're not responsible for that, but you have an opportunity to really help us. And I think you will. I'm confident. Thank you again.
Good work, thank you.
Jess,
And
do you
I
have
too,
a copy of that?
walk that neighborhood. I live
Do you have a
probably
copy of that?
200 feet from you. I agree with everything you say, and we can do some of these
Yeah, I
things
thought that-
administratively immediately,
That's
but
interesting.
I think there's a strong will on the part of the council to really get to the bottom of this now.
As soon as we get those foot patrols going, the better it's gonna be for us. I do wanna say one more thing here. Foot patrols are not gonna stop everything, but I'll tell you what they would stop. They would have stopped this thing that happened at the Hummingbird House, because that was a sustained effort by those students to terrorize the owner and his guests next door. A foot patrol would stop the kids from stealing the street signs. They're very expensive street signs, because it takes a long time to get those out of the ground. Now, there's a fence over on William Street that was broken. Foot patrol might see that, might not. A full can of beer was thrown through a window over on Brinkerhoff Street, Irwin property. Might have caught them, might not. But if you see 4 kids running, I would think an officer would say, hey, where are you going? So, whatever you can do would be appreciated. Thank you again.
Thank
Art,
you.
has your committee discussed a neighborhood watch or anything like that?
In past years, there was a neighborhood watch, volunteers, and one time, John Walker from the Walker Funeral Home and a fellow who was in the BCI, they were both attacked and hit over the head with their own flashlights. That doesn't work. We need the police. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will say when I spoke to Jason, his father had built like a beautiful sign out in front of the Hummingbird House, and he had to take that in because he was afraid of it being vandalized. And he's also he's very into holidays, and he would put out like Christmas decorations, and he'd put out holiday decorations that were like horribly vandalized.
Is there any other member of the livable community who wants to present, or is this the entirety of the presentation?
I think Art has pretty much covered the issues.
Okay.
We do need a police presence. I'm gonna go to sleep tonight in Mayberry and wake up in Fallujah tomorrow.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much for your information.
Thank you for your efforts. Appreciate it.
Okay. Returning to the regular agenda, is there anything regarding item 1 from the Parking Violations Bureau anybody wants to discuss? Is there
That's
pretty
cheap, right?
standard? Anything from the council?
If I remember correctly, Chief presented this at the last parking committee. I think we're up to what, 60,000 in fines?
I think it was just over $40,000 in fines collected for the year to date.
One good thing though is we've seen a market drop in that. I guess it was, our thoughts are that because people are getting used to the system and enforcement, and which is good, because that was really worrying me, the amount of people getting fines. In fact, it still worries me. You know, I think a good parking plan really should have minimal amount of income coming in from fines, but and I do know it's still a problem that people can't park longer than 2 hours, but I am happy to see that it's actually decreasing.
44,000 year to date,
44.
inception of the year.
Yeah, and we were on pace to get like close to 90,000 when it first started. Like if it had kept up those first few months, the first quarter.
Okay, number 2.
What?
It's double last year.
Oh, of course.
But the budget of 120 is
Makes sense.
Okay. Number 2, agenda items brought forward from departments to be approved by committee and recommended to council. I thought we could save discussion of these items for the actual agenda, so I will entertain a motion to move those forward.
So moved.
All right, now the second.
Perfect timing.
But roll call, sorry.
Who moved it first? I didn't hear.
Peter?
And second was Mary.
Yeah.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Hensel?
Yes.
Mary?
But there are some things aside from the 3 items, like in addition to, that I would like to talk about. I made some notes for myself.
Can we, before you do that, there will be one other item on the agenda for tonight. We could have a little bit of initial discussion on it, so if you've had a chance to deliberate, it's under initial considerations on your full agenda. The recent addition to have our new planner, Melena Tamer, be named our MWBE officer, and I think we needed that passed for tonight.
That's correct.
It doesn't have any fiscal impact, so would be eligible for Rule 4, but if you would take a look and consider it to move forward, that would even not then require us to do Rule 4 at that time.
Help me out. What does it
Is
have?
there-
What is
Yeah, what is that?
Minority and women-owned
Oh,
business
okay.
enterprises.
Correct, yeah.
One more time?
Minority and women-owned business enterprises.
Okay.
Most of these state, well, almost all of these state grant contracts that we have come with percentages attached to them, where you have to specific percentage to state certified businesses that are owned by women or by minorities. There's quite a bit of reporting that goes along with that, and it's helpful to have an official council declared coordinator liaison for all of that communication, and Lynn is the best person to do it. It used to be Eva, but she's no longer with us.
So I'd like.
So that needs to be moved for initial consideration.
For put on the
And
agenda.
put on the
itself.
agenda, and then at the time of the vote, when it comes up, we can,
Well, if you move
enact
it as
Rule
a
4.
committee, I don't think it would be any longer initial consideration. It would be on the agenda.
Okay.
It's actually listed on the agenda.
Right. Just
Yeah.
didn't make it on
As,
yours.
under initial consideration.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have to evoke Rule 4 to move it to the regular agenda.
But we could just
Vote
keep
on
it under initial consideration, then enact Rule 4 at that
You
time.
could do it that way.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Okay. Okay, so,
I'll make the, well, we can just bring it up in
right,
initial,
we'll just bring it up.
for
Okay.
initial consideration.
There are some things that are connected to these three items that I do want to talk about. And since we do have building inspector here, maybe we could also talk a bit about the code enforcement suggestion about acquiring all rental properties. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit since you're here, if that's okay with you?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so, item number 1 on the agenda about the Plattsburgh Housing Authority, police services. So I read that over, and I see that, in section 1K3, it calls for reports, which I've never seen. And I would like to see those. So it's number 1K3 on the, I don't know if it's on the contract itself.
It was, in our backup
Yeah.
information in the contract.
And I don't know if this council's ever received those.
So,
There's a
Supposed to be
report.
reported to the council?
Yeah, that's what it says, the language on there. I don't have access to the actual document if anybody has it.
I can tell you for item number 3, I got a text from Councilor Kelly, and he wanted to see financials in relation to.
Well, hang on, let me do with number 1 first, and then we'll talk about number 3.
Okay.
But I want to get to the bottom of that. So it's number 1-K3. There's some language at the end that references reporting back to the city government and council.
Semi-annual progress reports and evaluation services requested and provided under this contract were reviewed by the executive director, police chief,
Thank you.
appropriate deputy chiefs, and lead zone commanders, and identified community representatives. and
Could you speak up, Sylvia? Sorry. Just can't hear you over the air conditioner.
Sorry.
Just, you can start where you left off, that's fine.
Appropriate deputy chiefs and lead zone commanders, and identified community representatives, political leaders, example, mayor, and council members.
There it is.
So we'll look into that.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to see that followed through with. And also in the same document, Article 3C references information to the city and the, as a whole, which also means us, regarding where the officers are being sent to, crime, all of that. I want that too. So those are a couple of things I wanted to bring up. They're cited in the document, and I don't know if we've ever gotten them before. So everybody here has been on the council before me, so.
So are you suggesting that this committee, your committee, doesn't push it forward to the agenda tonight?
No, I'm not saying I'm not in favor of pushing this to the agenda. I just wanted to talk about that now, because that doesn't really need to be part of the conversation later. So I wanted to bring that up now, that apparently there are reports that are part of this agreement that we're not getting, and I want to see them, so.
Can you get together with Dean on that and figure out what we're going to do? Thank you.
So that's that.
I'm not gonna be, this was,
And then number 3, there's been some conversation by email among us. The resource officer position, item number 10 on that document references progress reports. Has the council ever received progress reports
Well,
regarding?
we just enacted it that contract for the first time was adopted last year.
yeah.
So
But
this
that
would be
means
the
last
first-
year, there should have been progress reports,
Well,
and we
this,
never got
for
them.
this year, it is true, and I did email that question to you. you know, in order to evaluate whether this is a good investment and whether we should renew the contract, we should see what has happened. How have these officers impacted? What's their work been? What encounters have they had with students? You know, how many problems were averted and how were they handled versus going, let's say, to the guidance office? Because I mean, I emailed my colleagues articles that kind of question the effectiveness of these SRO officers, and I just think it's healthy to evaluate, to see exactly what do we want out of this program, and what are we getting. Even, you know, we have goals, but what are we getting?
I would argue that the school district is the one that is getting something.
Well, what I'm saying is, if we're providing, so I think it's important for us to know how that is working within the school.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But everybody's clear that
But I
we're
think
providing on a
it has to
reimbursement
come,
basis, right?
but also,
I'm
that
sorry,
has a
Dave.
couple of different perspectives
I didn't hear what you
as
said.
well.
Sorry.
I mean, there is a report coming from the SROs, or would it be coming from the actual school district as
The
to?
one from the school is they're the ones that.
Yep.
Exactly.
Asked us to
That's what
provide
the
this
progress
service.
report says. That's the language in the document says.
Yeah, I don't see any issue with that.
So would you be able to ask the school district for a report on how the program is going? Given that we're debating.
I'll broach the subject and see in what way they can actually provide it, but I think at any rate, we can probably get something.
Yeah, we have to. It's in the language. It's part of item 10 on that document, so. Well,
Contracts
look,
are contracts.
contracts are contracts, and what's good for one is good for all.
Fair
And
enough.
everybody has to be held to the same standard. If we're asking for information from a particular group, but we're ignoring another, that's not fair.
No, I
It
agree.
has to be done.
It's just funny.
Well, you can laugh.
Here, Counselor Gibbs.
Well,
I'd be most interested in seeing information of how many disciplinary actions that were normally referred to principals and people in the school are now being referred to SROs.
Or
probably none.
I don't
None.
believe
No.
we're gonna get any sort of.
that's not the
Well,
way an
but
SRO
I
works.
think that's really significant because most of the studies that try to evaluate the effectiveness of these programs that is their subject matter. So are we shifting away from guidance and counseling, and to what extent are we, you know, making things a matter of having to deal with law enforcement in whatever fashion that may be?
But isn't that
But
the issue
that's-
of the school district? I mean, they're paying us to provide
That's
the
right.
personnel to take care of a need that they've addressed. I mean, is it up to us to evaluate their needs?
Well,
I mean, it's a deliberative question, I
can
just
agree
wonder
to-
who should be asking it.
the document talks about what exactly, and you know, it'd be actually really helpful, we had a projector right here, but the document talks about what basically are the responsibilities. And an SRO is not in a school to discipline the children. That's not why they're
Exactly.
there. They're there mostly for community outreach, and also as a safeguard in these uncertain times. I did share some information with the council by email before we came, of my own personal experiences with the resource officer in our district at Peru, and how things have changed. When I first started teaching 18 years ago, we had an SRO who was a state trooper. That's when you were in school, and his role there was very, very minimal, but things have changed so much. So now we have a sheriff and a sheriff's deputy, and he is fantastic. And what he does is mostly interact with the students across the entire campus, the K through 12 campus. Engage with students, get to know them, have a rapport, to help identify, you know, if there is an area of concern, or sometimes just engaging in conversation. Students will volunteer information to the school resource officer about concerns or things happening. And then, this is also the reality of teaching now. We are mandated by law to have lockdowns, lockouts, hold in place drills, just like we have to have fire drills. These are all part of the procedures, and we've had lockdowns that were not drills. And so has the city of Plattsburgh. I know that there was an incident earlier this year with a student who was on one of the campuses with a weapon. This is the climate of teaching, and I'm not saying that it's not necessarily morally justified, but it is the climate in which we teach and in which children learn. And I think that having an SRO on the campus adds an enormous benefit, but it's just my opinion.
And the benefit is measured by the fact that the school districts have asked us for personnel to do it and pay for that personnel to do that service. And at the time, if you recall, they contemplated, should we approach other different groups or get it done in other different, all we're doing, from what I understand, is providing the personnel that they've requested. You've used, for example, retired police officers for this.
Right.
But this is totally a call of the school district. The city is not involved in that decision making. We're merely
They'll get
responding
from
to
a
their
different
requests.
source.
And if I remember, we have more than, aren't there two in the,
Which is also important because it's so spread out.
right?
We have so many schools spread out across the entire city in that regards. But I think that's an important distinction that you just made.
Yes.
It's the city school district's request from us, and we're filling it, and they're paying for it, right? And I think that's an important distinction.
And they're the ones that decide to have an extra person, for instance, recently too. So this, I think they need to very carefully reflect on all that and make sure it's the program working well for them and deal with their constituents on that issue. But I don't believe it's our job to second guess their decision on that. They came to you for some personnel, and your role is to essentially try to help them out.
But we
I
still
mean,
want.
I can't speak on behalf of them, but I would say that the times that we have spoken throughout the school year, and as recently as a couple weeks ago, they're very happy with how the program is working. So, but not speaking for them, just trying to build that up.
So, any of my concerns about it, I could take to that board as a constituent, as a city resident
I believe the
who's
school board
concerned.
meets
Yes,
quite
yes, I
regularly.
believe they do. Thank you.
Actually, I think they're meeting tonight. I think they're meeting tonight.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about that you wanted to talk about, Patrick?
Yeah, vote no on it.
That is your prerogative. Okay. I also had a question about our nuisance animal control officer and any reports that have been generated yet.
So I didn't have time to submit them just because of the time limits. I have the oral report that I can submit to you, and I can submit
Yeah, that'd be
the rest
great.
to Beth when she comes back.
Sure.
You weren't here last week, Elizabeth.
I did hear that. That's
I
great news.
I had a phone call actually from a constituent, a neighbor 2 houses down, that had issues with skunks and so on. And in 3 nights, I believe, he captured 5 skunks and a raccoon.
Yay.
So,
And they were very, very complimentary.
Oh, that's great.
so per the report that he submitted over the course of July, 10 skunks and 3 raccoons were caught from 6 different residences. So 6 different people called, and that was the totals.
Okay. Okay. I have a question about whether or not it's financially feasible, or the logistics of having this done. And this is in relation to reports that are already being generated. I think as a whole, the council is happy with the reports that you're generating. But we're getting complaints from people from the outlying areas of the city about things like syringes being found and criminal activity. Most certainly you can't be everywhere at once. And I wanted to know if installing cameras in some of these outlying areas would help, and if it is at all possible.
Currently, that's not possible. I mean,
It's not
installing cameras are costly, one, and the information technology expertise that it takes to put them into a network, we just don't have the capability at this time. Just as a general principle, they could help. I mean, that would be, it's a very beneficial tool for criminal investigations. I wish we had more of them.
Asset seizure money could not be used for that purpose.
Not in that case, no.
Because there is activity like that going on in areas that are, you know, dark and outlying, and it needs to be addressed. I don't know what the solution is, but maybe this can be part of the conversation that we have on Monday.
I could relay more details about an instance that I reported to Elizabeth that she may have relayed to you, but, you know, it was someone who had frequented a location regularly and said that she's pretty sure there's suspicious activity. So I'll speak through the mayor to you.
Or have her report directly to you.
Well, I encouraged her to do that, yeah.
Yeah. So you can get it in your system.
Absolutely.
Can you explain, I know you've explained it to me, but I did have a question, I think it was from you, Patrick, about asset seizure, asset forfeiture. How does that work exactly?
I can give you a general guideline. It's a little bit more complex than probably what you're asking. Asset seizure is a federal program that takes money that is used in forfeitures based on criminal convictions or monies and property related to those criminal convictions. And they are distributed to various municipalities, us being one of them. So we receive it through different channels, some federal, some state, but it is a federal program. So at the state level, sometimes when Clinton County seizes certain money or property pursuant to a criminal conviction, depending on whether it meets a certain set of criteria, we sometimes get money to put in that fund. So it's a very sporadic not reimbursement, distribution.
And how does it get
Revenue stream.
distributed?
Again, like that's a formula that I wouldn't be able to recite very well. Some of it is discretionary, some of it's not. I would say it's
Right.
mostly discretionary.
And does there have to be a criminal conviction? Because it's a civil asset forfeiture, usually.
The ones that we receive are related to criminal convictions.
So what kind of criteria are you required to conform to use the money?
There's a very lengthy document that details all those things. I wouldn't be able to recite them in a way that would make sense, but there are very specific rules on what it can be used for. I believe the term that they use is the appearance of impropriety, that even the appearance of it being used improperly can cause us to be removed from this federal sharing program. So we are very cautious on how we use it and make sure that it specifically conforms to the guidelines that they set. So when you ask a question like, can we use for cameras, you know, I'm going through my general understanding of it, and my gut is telling me, no, that doesn't fit in with what they outline.
I don't think it can be used for actual property or materialistic things.
It depends, but
It's pretty limited.
yeah, like I know one of the things that comes up is, could you purchase a vehicle?
Right.
And that is an absolute no. So things like that.
But you can,
What
Chief,
if a
I'm
vehicle
sorry,
is
you could
seized,
use
then-
can't you use it to purchase some equipment for that vehicle that can be used for investigative purposes?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like we need a seminar on this.
No. So they actually updated the guidelines this year, and we sent 2 employees down to that
Wow.
because it was a day event. Yes,
Right.
it's something that's very, very rigid. To your question, yes, we do get seized vehicles.
Was that training paid for by asset forfeiture funds?
No, I think it was free. It was like in Albany.
Fair enough.
So it was a day trip.
Let's suffice it to say, you've got a gut feeling that cameras couldn't be purchased, but could you just confirm that for us after looking at the guidelines?
Could you send us that
Maybe it
document?
can.
right in there, so, I mean, you can search online, you can
Probably find
you can
it.
find it, it's not secret.
Is the asset forfeiture fund still around 160,000?
We can just say 10%.
But that can also fluctuate every year too. I mean, it can have
I'm
peaks and
sorry,
valleys per
Richard.
year.
I
There's no
missed
way
that.
of
176,000.
no way of determining every year what you're going to receive.
Right.
Right. So that's why we predominantly use it for training, because that is one of the specifically allowed
Right.
things we can.
Clear cut.
And training is one of the bigger deals in our department, that it's a lapse in training for a lot of areas. It's just, we have a lot of critical areas that training is necessary. So that's why we use that, and we manage it very, very efficiently so it doesn't come out of the general fund budget.
Does the existence of asset forfeiture change priorities for what the police department might focus on? Would they be incentivized to focus on investigations that might lead to asset forfeiture?
Because there is no, so if that were the case, we would receive forfeitures very, very regularly, and we don't. So to say it's incentivized is not the case, at least not in our case.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
Okay. I did mention earlier, I just wanted to talk a minute about the suggestion that came out of this Livable Community Committee about requiring all rental properties to be registered. And I think, Jeff, since this is something you did, and you did too, it's my understanding that the spirit behind the request is you having the information to then go out and dispatch more inspections, because you know exactly where the rental properties are. Is that, how do we make that happen? How do we make every rental property registered? How do we enforce it? I mean, what would be the process for that?
We've had a lot of discussions about that. Just put together 90% of the rentals won't be hard, because we have MLD records, et cetera. The remaining 10% that are kind of hidden will be harder. So we can put together the registry, start putting together right away. The resources to go and do inspection more comes with what Councilor Ansel researched, having a program where we have annual inspections and charge a fee for those annual inspections for multifamily homes, and use that fee to pay for the additional resources, because you don't have the resources to do annual inspections on every rental out there. So there is a program we've been trying to assemble.
Right. And what they
through
do in Burlington, not every single apartment is inspected every year. It's based upon the condition and what the condition of the apartment and past inspections. For example, if an inspector goes in and looks at an apartment complex, and each of the apartments maybe have some minor infractions, a few minor infractions, say fewer than 6, and they have those, they go back in 30 days and those infractions have been corrected, they may be free of inspection for 3 years. But yet they still pay per year for that inspection fee. But they're not actually inspected for 3 years. Now, if there's an apartment building that has multiple code infractions and of serious nature, they may get 90 days to fix them. If they're not fixed within 90 days, they're fined, and then they go back. There's inspections every couple of weeks, and they're continued to be fined until those infractions are fixed. And then, once they're fixed, that unit is inspected again within a year, in a year's period of time.
What are your thoughts on that, Joe?
Well, I just wasn't really prepared to talk about it tonight, but
Okay.
My thoughts are it's a little more complicated than I think most people think.
I'm sure, that's
right
why
now
I wanted your
the
opinion.
state requires us to do periodic inspections on 3 apartment buildings or more. So
I'm sorry, 3
apartment buildings or more.
or,
If they have 3 units.
3 or more
in one
units.
apartment.
okay.
So 1 and 2 family homes are exempt. So right now we're discussing all rental units, which could include 1 and 2 family homes, obviously. which would increase that number dramatically. And I think what Mr. DeGrandpré was talking about was actually inspecting them at a change of tenancy, which is really complicated. Because how could, you couldn't schedule, if,
Right.
if 100 people moved out on June 1st, how could we possibly, you know, so.
Well, I think
A schedule thing is something that maybe we could schedule and, you know, make something like that.
I think when he got it to clarify his comment, when he was saying change of tenants, he's thinking of the end of a school year.
Right.
You have new
Yeah, no,
tenants
I
in
know
September.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
He's
But that's hundreds
relating
of
that
people
to
moving at
college
once.
housing. I
Right.
understand that, but if you're gonna speak to this citywide, it's gonna include a lot more than college housing.
Mhm.
We've gotta be prepared for everything that's swept up.
And you can't discriminate. You can't
Right,
just say we're gonna
exactly.
target this
Yeah.
area.
I mean, people could move out of an apartment in a month. It could be,
Right.
you know, that happens. People get evicted, people choose to leave, I just wanna make sure.
Well,
we know what we're
that's
talking
why
Okay.
the program that they have over in Burlington, which obviously has a lot of college housing too, what they do is if they go and check an apartment, say a 2 or 3 family apartment, and there are no issues or 1 or 2 minor issues, they may not be up for inspection for 3 years or even 5 years, I think is the maximum that they.
Yeah, I think I've heard you mention 5 years. I think 5 years would be tricky for us because the state code
The state
requires
says
3 years.
3
but
years,
don't-
yeah.
don't
But I
know
mean,
how
even
people
if you
go
kept it
beyond
at 3 years,
So I think the concept is good, having a registry, having personnel with contact information, you know, having people at your fingertips to be able to hold them.
So what kind of process and what would it take to develop this kind of plan or, you know, fit it in or adjust whatever you do to kind of meet the needs and suggestions that have been made? So what would be involved?
Well, we're trying to crunch the numbers right now,
Okay,
figure out how many man hours that would take, and
right.
how many personnel, how much we have to charge for it
To pay for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I may be wrong, but I think, and obviously that's a larger city, so they have more units. I think Burlington charges $100 a year per unit, per apartment unit.
Speak up.
$100 per year.
$100
Thank you.
$100 a year per unit, per apartment unit.
Okay.
But again, they're a larger city and with more apartments too.
Well, I mean, does the livable community committee or this committee want to set up a goal and a timeline? I mean, is it reasonable to set an expectation and try to figure out exactly the steps that need to be taken and project the completion of that goal?
I think that's something.
I think the initial thing you want to do is have a registry, then you would know exactly how many units are out there, how many are more, 3 or more. You know, you'd have to establish that first before you can get to the next step, which would be, you know, having an inspection schedule.
I'm
We're
just
kind of
saying-
putting the cart before the horse there. Why not enumerate?
Well, if that's the first step, then you state it as the first step of the plan, and then you say what you're gonna do next, and what you're gonna do next, and then the new system is born.
The initial upstart would be a little complicated. We'd have to verify all that information, all that registry information, especially rental information that we didn't have initially because there were 1 or 2 family homes. So we'd have to verify number of bedrooms, parking, that kind of stuff. Once the program is up and running, it'd be a little more stable.
Except when you have summertime move-outs, like you say, 100 in 1 day.
But that's what Peter's saying, like every couple of years.
Places in 1 day is determined.
Right, that would be impossible. So you'd have to make it an annual thing maybe so that we could schedule them and have a more regular process.
And it happens July 1st, I think we had 78 move-outs in 1 day.
Yeah, right. So
Amazing turnover in the summertime.
thank you for all of your feedback. And I know it's getting on close to 5:30, so I'll move to number 3. Any old business you want to talk about?
I would be curious to hear the chief's reaction to the other proposals of the communities committee.
About foot patrols?
Foot patrols?
Yeah.
What's your reaction, Chief?
I don't know if Mr. DeGrantke made a very specific request. Generally saying foot patrol covering a lot of area is not, it's not a silver bullet. It's not something that, to argue that having an officer generally on foot patrol at some time of the day would have stopped all of the things at 92 Court is speculative. I went back and researched the history of our calls to that place, and I think that we issued noise tickets 8 out of maybe 12 or 14 times that we were called there. To say that warnings were issued or not, again, is speculative, because I would, and I've spoken to Mr. DeGrantke. He asked the questions about parking and when an officer goes to a noise call. And I said, we cannot issue something that we don't personally observe at a violation level. So our officers are well aware of that place and the neighboring complaints about it.
We might need to leave it there because it's past time for the council to begin.
Yeah.
So if you
But thanks for that. Thank you.
give them.
We need a motion to adjourn.
Yes, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ansel?
Yes.
Mayor Reed?
Yes. Begin the common council meeting tonight then with our pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor Reed?
Present.
Counselor Armstrong?
Here.
Counselor Kelly? Counselor Gibbs?
Here.
Counselor Ansel?
Here.
Counselor McFarland?
Here.
Counselor Moore?
Don't need to comment much because I think many of you participated in all the various events we had this year, from the budget to the very successful public forum last night. Thank you, Mr. Miller and Ethan and Melena and all the various other people who helped put that on, to the hearing we had earlier for the generic EIS. It's been a very active week, and we're making an awful lot of great progress. Thank you all for your work.
Resolved that the payrolls for the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending August 21st, 2019 in the amount of $69,768.84 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn in the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Ansel. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. You have in your packet the various reports, and you discussed a bit of them in the previous committee meeting. Is there anything to add from governance strategy and city operations? Councilor Armstrong.
The Plattsburgh Sustainability Task Force met last night at 4 o'clock. And our task was to review a list of the 30 most achievable actions on the Climate Smart Community Action List. We discussed those at length, and the committee, the task force is in favor of developing a plan to accomplish those actions so that we can receive certification by January 5th. So I will be writing up minutes for that meeting, and we'll give them to you.
Thank you. City infrastructure, Councilor Moore.
Well, I just wanted to mention that the striping is in progress, looks very good, and we still have a few more paving projects to complete. Protection Avenue improvement, so things are progressing well.
Thank you. Finance and Budget Counselor Kelly can't be with us, but he is back in town and healing up nicely, so we hope to have him return for next week, perhaps through video conference. And next week also will be my hearing for the mayor's budget, so will be your budget very, very soon. Public Safety, Counselor Gibbs?
Well, we just had our regularly scheduled meeting, and those items that came onto that agenda have been advanced, and I'm sure we'll have more discussion. I also wanted everyone to know that I called for a meeting with Peter and Dean and the mayor on Monday at 10:30, and we're going to have a more in-depth discussion on things dealing with policy and so forth, to hopefully address the things that came out of the Livable Community Committee. And I'm hoping that my goal is that we can have this meeting and come up with something actionable between now and our next Public Safety Committee. So.
And I believe Chief Lawless and Building Inspector McMahon can attend, but Chief Ritter will not be available morning on Monday. Public Library, Councilor Ensign?
Yes, there is a meeting coming up on Tuesday, August 27th. I'm going to ask Councilor, because I have a conflict with a meeting also at the same time. But I will try to get the minutes and make a report.
MLD Board President, Councilor McFarland?
Sorry, I have no updates other than that our regular scheduled meeting is next Thursday at 4:30, so if you haven't marked your calendars yet, please do.
Thank you. Resolve the reports as listed are hereby ordered received, and any written reports are placed on file among the public records of the City Clerk's office. Moved by Councilor Gibbs and seconded by Councilor Armstrong. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. No correspondences or recommendations from boards at this time. Please continue.
Resolved that the bills audited by the Common Council for the week ending August 23rd, 2019 in the amount of $589,708.23 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, seconded by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Are there any individuals like to please come address the council on any items on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, please continue.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore, the Common Council approves renewing the contract with Plattsburgh Housing Authority for the provision of supplemental police services by a Plattsburgh police officer, September 1st, 2019 through August 31st, 2020. The total revenue for the city is billed in a monthly basis to cover the cost of our officer. There is no charge in the contract provision or reimbursement cost from 2019.
Moved by Councilor McFarland, seconded by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion.
Yeah, I just had a question about that, Chief. Is it, there's one officer that is assigned to the housing?
That's correct. I have the same question.
Okay, so there's no rotating if the officer is on vacation or so on, it just, there's no officer that week if,
To do the specific things that are required of the housing officer contract. So background investigations, fingerprinting, investigations that stem from the Housing Authority Administration. We do when we can facilitate the fingerprints because that's a scheduled thing every Tuesday, but the others, yeah.
thank you.
Any
Thank
further
you.
questions?
Obviously, Councilor Gibbs brought up the reporting and stuff there, and that's what
I did.
Roll call?
Councilor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs?
Yes.
Councilor Ensel?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
Yes.
Councilor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore, the Common Council approves the mayor and police chief Ritter to sign a contract with the Police Plattsburgh City School District for school resource officer for the 2019-2020 2020 school year. There's no change from the contract of last year.
Moved by Councilor Ansel, second by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion.
I mean, yeah, I was against it last year. I have the same thoughts on it this year. I just don't think it's appropriate to be putting children in a kind of situation where they might have to deal with police officers. Unless it's absolutely necessary, then you can call a police officer in. I remember when we got our school resource officer when I was in high school. You know, I remember being a teenager, and interactions with police was always a very uncomfortable thing. You know, getting pulled over at that age was, you know, probably the most stressful time that you could have, even if you weren't really doing anything wrong, other than possibly speeding or something like that. I just don't think it's appropriate.
As I stated earlier, I do believe that a decision to place a school resource officer in a school is worthy of evaluation, of study, and so forth, but I will take into account the mayor's point about the decision that's already been made by the decision-making entity, and we're simply contracting to provide those officers. So I believe a no vote for myself tonight would be misplaced. And, you know, there may come a point where I do address the school board and question that, because, you know, there are limited resources available to our schools nowadays, and I would hope that there would be an exhaustive and thorough discussion of exactly what programs benefit kids in the best way possible. And I wonder, given the research that I've reviewed, you know, whether this is necessarily the best way to use school resources. So, but I will vote yes, because I was persuaded by the mayor.
Oh, it's an important distinction. It's
Yeah.
the school district that makes the decision about whether or not the officer goes in. We as a council are approving city officers to be part of that, which I think is a good fit, because it's a city school district and we have a city police force.
Correct me. It was my understanding that they don't draw from existing officers. It's that Chief Ritter will.
Yes, please.
Yes. He will draw from a pool.
Right.
Right.
And they're not, I think many of them are also retired officers, are they
So
not?
the specific position is required that you're a retired police officer in other categories. But we draw from retired Plattsburgh police officers.
Okay.
That was the prerogative of the school district approaching us about this, and we like to accommodate them.
Well, and you know, I believe that I have faith that you will help assign and line up people that are the best, that will meet the objectives of that program.
Certainly, I mean, just to speak on that, it does take a little bit of a different personality to entrust somebody in a school capacity. Just like I would want certain personality assigned for narcotics enforcement, just like I would want a certain personality assigned for someone doing community policing. Not to say that those are too different, but you have to have a broader mindset when it comes to being in a school setting, very much so.
I guess my question is, if we're, the SROs are retired police officers, are they being paid through the city, or are they being paid through the school district, and the school district is giving us the money and we pay them?
They're
I guess
being paid from the city, and we are reimbursed dollar for dollar. So
Then
the
I
contract provides that whatever the cost is, the school will pay for it.
why wouldn't they be paid directly then from the school district?
This was something that we looked at from a lot of different ways in consultation with the school and the finance department, that we didn't want to overcomplicate it. So because they were our employees and they are contracting them out, that was the arrangement.
I remember because of that we had a discussion last year about insurance, right? As far as liability or something like that, it's on the city.
I do recall what you were talking about.
I just remember a conversation. I just remembered it. I forgot all about it, but I remember we had a discussion about
Yeah,
liability.
So a lot of the other things, workers' compensation, all all of the ancillary costs that are our responsibility. So it comes down to the training aspect of why they are our employees being contracted out. Being a school employee, they're responsible for all the training, which is very extensive. So it made most sense to do it the way that we're doing it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Councilor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs?
Yes.
Councilor Ansel?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
No.
Councilor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore, the common council approves one police department employee to attend the 6th annual training conference, domestic violence, labor, and life, from September 5th through the 6th, 2019, in Rochester, New York. The total cost will not exceed $187 and will be expensed out of the asset forfeiture fund.
Moved by Councilor Ansel and seconded by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion? Roll call.
Councilor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs?
Yes.
Councilor Ansel?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
Sure.
Councilor Moore?
Yes.
There's a resolution for initial consideration that we briefly discussed in committee, but can bring it up again now. We'd like to put it on the floor.
I would like to move the resolution, waive the reading, and enact Rule 4.
Moved by Councilor Ansel, seconded by Councilor Armstrong. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion on the item itself. I think Mr. Miller explained the purpose of this request at this time.
Did we approve Eva for this last year when she was hired?
Yes.
I'm sorry? We approved Eva for this last year when she was hired.
Yes.
Just all those initials are confusing. I'm glad you clarified that. All right.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Roll call? Roll call, I'm sorry.
Councilor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs?
Yes.
Councilor Ansel?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
Yes.
Councilor Moore?
Yes.
Is there any new business or additional council reports?
I just had one comment I wanted to make on the structure that used to be at the corner of Brinkerhoff and North Catherine. It's an open cellar,
Oh,
and there is no blocking of the egress to that open cellar. You know, I think it's kind of risky that there isn't anything there to stop anybody from falling in there. There used to be a caution tape, now there's nothing.
Joe, could you go and take a look at that and make sure it conforms to all of our codes?
Yeah, we're working with the owner right now, he's gonna fill that in next week. His insurance not coming, so we're gonna keep on him about that.
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other items? Any closing comments on any topic from the public, please?
Becky King. I just wanted to thank Chief Ritter and the council members for including the police blotter activities report in the weekly agendas. For the longest time, I've read the reports filed by the police department, the building inspector reports, and then weekly seeing what the public works department does as far as roads and water and maintenance of the city's infrastructure. And it was just eye-opening to see how much the police department actually does for the city, and how much effort and work the officers put in to keep the city a wonderful place to live. And I just wanted to thank you for making sure that was available to all of Plattsburgh. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Chief. Any other members of the public, please come forward. Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor McFarland. Roll call.
Councilor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs?
Yes.
Councilor Ansel?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
Yes.
Councilor Moore?
Yes.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. See you next week.
Hey, Becky,